October 20th, 2019.
I know it may seem late, but I feel like it's about the right amount of time to actually process the film, to discuss the Joker, in that obviously people wanted to make reactionary commentary about it and then hop on the hype that's associated with the release of the film just to get clicks and shit. But I think now that everyone's had time to sort of actually think about the content of the film and think about what's actually happened, especially in the context of having Catwoman cast as Zoe Kravitz, and that's it with the Robert Pattinson the Batman film. They haven't really put it out of the possibility that this is a prequel for that universe, and in that the Suicide Squad is getting sort of is not a reboot, but so in the context of the Suicide Squad team anyway, Amanda Waller would always change the team, so it's not always the same Suicide Squad team.
The Suicide Squad is whomever Waller wants it to be at any given point.
Because the people die anyway, so that's kind of where...
And Deadshot's just like the baddest dude.
Right. I mean he's kind of like the captain for a couple of missions.
He can go toe-to-toe with Batman for a pretty good fight until Batman decides that he's tired of messing with him. Yeah. But Deadshot's a very formidable... he's weird because he's not really he's a villain. He's a bad guy. But he's also got weird ethics.
He's kind of more of an anti-hero, I think he definitely gets more in the anti-hero category than villain, in that I think he started off as a villain, but the more they wrote the character, they put him more in the anti-hero category just to...
Well, he has to make so many sacrifices so that he can, make sure his kid has, what was it, treatment or school or whatever it is they need for that story arc to move properly.
Well, and I think it's important to articulate anti-heroes in that if we look at the Punisher, he's obviously not a hero and he's obviously not a villain, so the anti-hero role is important to articulate. There are these characters that are specifically anti-heroes.
Well, Punisher is vengeance incarnate.
Right, I mean, but he's an anti-hero. In that because he has no code against killing, his murder list makes him impossible to call a hero. But then his obvious intentions make it impossible to call him a villain. So that's kind of where it's the same with like Spawn.
They always show characters like that, and anti-heroes in general, as willing to cross lines to achieve some kind of protecting innocence, or most of the time it's vengeance, it seems. But there's the few times that they do something good, it's like it's offset because they're so merciless in how they execute their agenda.
So all that said, to say that I think this is where the idea of this Joker film framing him as an anti-hero is only accurate for about 10 seconds, and in that he's only an anti-hero for in the audience's mind. In his own mind, he immediately crosses from being an anti-hero to a villain, and then he says as such later in the film. But when you see it, it's hard to tell just because you're not privy to his mindset until later in the film.
I think the only way that he can even extend the anti-hero at all is in like a bizarro Gotham where there are no superheroes. He's just the Joker.
No.
He
can't because he enjoys killing, and this is the important articulation.
That's what I mean. Like in terms of the only way it could exist is a bizarro world. That's the only way that something like that would work. And that movie clearly isn't Bizarro World. They try to make it as realistic as possible.
But even okay,
it's like the most
in the
New
Bizarro
York
universe, Batman's the bad guy.
I know.
And Joker tries to stop him. Batman's the murderer, and that's kind of where even in that it's not the same. Like,
I know.
You can't have. This is what I mean. The construct of he kills 3 people in his first instance of murder. So in the first 2, he's an anti-hero, but in the third he becomes a villain.
Yeah, because the guy was like pleading for mercy. Yeah.
And this is an important articulation as to why he's only an anti-hero for about 30 seconds, and then he immediately crosses into a villain. But if you're watching it as an audience, it's hard to see this transition happen. But then what has also been missed is the context of the dancing. So what I took from the dancing is that we're obviously given the story of, in the context of someone who's supposed to be a mentally ill individual who is being failed by society, falls through the cracks, and then themselves cracks as a mentally ill person who crosses over into being
Joker. It's a state of mind at that point.
Right, and it's the wild card.
Yeah,
it's the wild card in that. So, it was put to me well in that if you have math, a negative times a negative ends up being a positive. So if you have someone who has nothing to lose, put them in a situation that they have nothing to lose, that actually ends up being a positive outcome for those people a lot of times. So like, you have this individual who has become at the bottom echelon of society to be a point where they are mentally ill, downtrodden, and then you have a situation where they're literally faced with the upper echelon of society who is at first accosting a woman who's not part of the upper echelon. They're using their white male privilege to accost this woman, and because of his condition, he starts laughing at her. So this mentally ill person then becomes the object of their disdain and their elite aggression.
Yeah.
And because the elite aggression can go unchecked, now briefly we have this individual become the image and symbol of the backlash against elite oppression. However, that gets lost immediately when he starts murdering the guy, like when he goes after the guy to start murdering him. But because you have people who are then in the mindset of being oppressed by the elite, they're willing to forgive that, and they overlook it in order to go with this Joker.
Yeah, well, he just hunted him down at that point. He wasn't even the Joker at that point.
Well, but I'm saying, like, in the sense of how this film is setting up the social psychology as to why the Joker mentality spreads at the end of the film.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean in that the people of the city are willing to forgive the later. They're overlooking the murder part.
Yeah, because they drag
all they see, all they care about
at one point.
Yeah. The mob mentality is willing to overlook the dirty parts for what they perceive and what they will project to be, quote unquote, the greater good at the time. So this is also why, in setting up this film or this universe, as to why I'll say I'm not done with obviously not just me, but when we're reviewing this, I'll say this film is only good, or it's only great if it's in the context of a larger universe. Otherwise, it's just okay, in that if you have things like the Barcelona general strike happening in real life, if you have the yellow vests, you have the Hong Kong revolutions happening. The stuff in Joker is just kind of mediocre, and really it's a vapid revolution in that there's not actually a real.
It's like it's a dim recollection of Detroit.
Yeah, Basically.
It's like it's not even a revolution. It's just a riot.
Exactly, and in that's why I think the film.
I don't think that they can make a Joker movie without making a next Joker movie.
No, and that's what I'm getting at.
I don't think that they can create this version of Joker without finishing this storyline.
Otherwise, it's not that great.
It's wasted.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole world that evolves after this of crime in Gotham, the rearing of Bruce Wayne, his eventual rise to sociopathy, and. I agree. As long as it's like establishes like a starting point, a neutral starting point in the 80s, which is kind of interesting because I was born in the 80s. You were born in the 80s.
Right.
So this is like kind of a weird, distant memory that didn't actually happen. But it's incidentally, my dad, when he saw it, he said that they kind of nailed New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked.
They did.
Well, they used New York, obviously.
Yeah.
But like they nailed that era of New York. The cars were all
they
right.
Totally did.
They took out all those fucking like coin-op phones, dusted them off, sprayed some pee on them, and installed them, and like everything, they nailed it. And so, in a lot of ways, it's a really fantastic starting point for a dark version of Gotham that we haven't had yet. And that's not to say that the Christopher Nolan's version of Year One and Dark Knight stuff, it was good, but it was still it was actually kind of tame for Batman.
And so then let's talk about how I don't think this film was all that dark.
This one wasn't dark. It was supposed to be disturbing, I think.
It in modern times it's not.
Yeah.
I think for a comic book movie, maybe.
I don't think it was a comic book movie though.
It was though,
yeah.
and this is, I think it was one of the better comic book movies.
I felt like
we've
I was
had
watching a drama.
Only if the Joker so it hasn't been asserted if the Joker that we see when we have him introduce it, like have him get introduced as the Joker or as Joker. I don't think it's the Joker. When he's introduced on the show as Joker, we still don't know if that's the final Joker that ends up being the.
He wasn't the one that shot.
Right, but
the Waynes. So.
But that was only in '89 Batman that became lore in the first place.
Sure.
So this gets back to.
I think there's gonna be multiple Jokers in this universe.
Well, this gets back to now. Multiple Jokers has been part of the lore for at least 30 years too. So this gets back to, again, they did multiple. So the Gotham TV show did that transition of Jokers. I think the best. I think they did it better than the Joker that we got in the movie. And in that, I think the Joker, the Jeremiah Valeska, Xander Wild Joker storyline, even with the imposter thrown in the middle, so there's really 3 Jokers in the Gotham series. To me, that's already still a superior Joker origin story than the one in the film. But in that, this gets back to why they were better able to tie Jokers. Well, I don't still think it's better than the films we've had so far. Joker's, or like his connection to his nemesis Batman is more drawn in that now we think that because he thought he was his half brother, that's what sort of drove him to become obsessed with Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And
I think that there's room for a lot of characters to be put into situations where the psychology of Joker emerges. I've read a lot of people are saying we need a female Joker, and that just tells me that they're not aware of Duela Dent, she's Two-Face's daughter and the daughter of the Joker somehow. She's a complex character, but she's the Lady Joker. There is a female Joker, but nobody knows about it because they haven't worked a version.
They're not real comic book fans.
That and I don't think that there's a story arc that's going to introduce her anytime soon. I think she's like a level 3 character, where you got to like not just be into it, but like be really into the depth of.
Well, I feel like Gotham could have gone a Hugo Strange thing where she's like a product of cloning.
Oh yeah.
Where
That's okay, so they could just still do it.
Yeah.
There's still room for Duella Dent to
Yeah.
appear in a meaningful way, and not just as like lip service character.
Well, in fact, I feel like they might be able to bring her in on Batman or Batwoman, which we should talk about.
That would actually be a really good place for that, because she'd be a good foil for Batwoman.
Yeah. Have you seen any of those?
I couldn't. I didn't have time to start watching. I think I'm like 2 or 3 late. Basically.
No. Yeah, it's only 2 in, but we'll get back to Batwoman and Supergirl and Black Lightning / the finale Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover.
Oh, they're finally wrapping it up.
Elseworlds. They're doing that. It's fucking insane.
Oh, man,
Holy
I need to
shit.
get caught
the
up
Monitor.
again.
This is where, to me, what the Berlanti universe is doing definitely rivals MCU.
The DC Infinite Earth stuff is so cool.
Yeah.
It's it sucks because you got to watch like hundreds of hours of a comic book story to make it make sense, but it's so worth it.
That's what it's supposed to be.
I know.
That's what it's supposed to fucking be.
It's the kind of thing that we always wanted to have running in the background. Whatever we're doing, it's like, I could just have that comic book running so I can pay attention to it, but I'm still doing this thing, and now they're doing it for us.
Yep.
And the technology is like, it's there.
Yep.
That they can make it look good enough that it some of it's hokey.
But it's a comic book.
It's supposed
stuff.
to be.
It's supposed to be, and I think this is where you have something like The Flash. They lean into it so hard that it works out fucking perfectly.
The Flash is like that.
I mean, but even down to bringing back the Flash from the 90s and having him play fucking Barry Allen's dad on the show and play a different version of Flash, and they're gonna have him play the 90s Flash in the fucking crossover. So they're not only like, they're leaning into this so fucking hard. It's insane that what they're doing with comic book universes on the Berlanti verse. It's combined. They might even bring in.
So what happens when Berlanti versus Constantine meets Keanu Reeves?
They might.
Constantine.
That's what I'm saying.
They might,
but they might have it in language only. So this is kind of where they might have reference to the Bale Batman. They might have reference to the fucking Keanu Reeves Constantine, but because those dudes would cost so much to get on screen, they would probably just be in like passing language, or in some like, because then they reference. Dude, I think they're bringing in '89 Batman.
What?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Holy shit.
But it's gonna be referenced in a way where you're gonna see it on a news story.
So the thing that I've always thought was cool about the reimagination of DC is that it allows for a Batman-only universe, or a Superman-only universe, or a Batman-Superman-only universe, or a Batman-Superman-Wonder Woman-only universe.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, like, I can't remember how long it took me to find out, but it's all because Dr. Manhattan didn't save the first human lantern. And they let him fall off of a train, like the train drove off of a ravine or something like that. And then that's the reason that there's all of the Infinite Earths.
Did you ever read?
So there's, in theory, that they wanted to undo it all, they could just go save his ass, but they're not going to.
There's even a different an alternate story on this idea that Grant Morrison did. I forget the name of the series, but the idea is that there's this group of secret agents that are going between multiverses to stop any sort of other occurrence of the Justice League arising. So every time like a Wonder Woman starts to appear, they take her out of existence.
So it's like an interdimensional Kang instead of a time hopping Kang.
Yeah, and I think they're even they might be called
am I mixing shit up? No, I'm not.
No, okay. There's the Invisibles. That's one. But in that one, they're like, they're not going after Justice League types, but then it's not Elseworlds. I forget the name. Like I said, I forget the name of the series, but I'm fairly positive Grant Morrison wrote that one too. But it plays with the notion of the idea that there's this force that emerges in all these various universes that also is predisposed to being Justice League types, but then there's a force that keeps that in check across different universes, so then it creates this meta awareness of the DC universe having its own special identity within other universes, because then they sort of imply...
Oh, is that like a way to bridge Marvel to DC?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They imply like X-Men, but they don't say it.
Well, there have been amalgams where like Superman and Hulk fight.
Well, yeah, it's amalgam comics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they cross over.
So it's not like
There's a whole series of that.
Yeah.
But this goes outside of that, even in that then it creates this whole other universe of people who are monitoring this universe and keeping it in check, but it's not you know how there's like
well, we kind of hinted at something like that. It'd be the equivalent of like Quasar and Dormammu meeting for coffee.
Right, but Dormammu and Quasar still exist within their universes.
Yeah.
They're entities within,
there's something that's watching them.
Yeah, exactly. So then they're even rumor, not to, this isn't tangential, it may seem tangential, but supposedly they're bringing fucking Lucifer into the Infinite Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover too.
Oh, finally! I mean, they'll finally have someone with some style and some sass.
I mean, but he's effectively above Omega level because he can create universes, so he might even just be there for narration.
Oh wow, that's kind of amusing.
They might bring him in for narration, but
really
they might
cool.
bring him in to be the Anti-Monitor's foil.
That would be really cool too.
Because then the Anti-Monitor hasn't. I don't think he's been shown yet in the.
So Lucifer is just like, quit messing with my martini, basically, and
he could, because he's got the power to create entire universes.
Yeah.
So he's beyond Omega level, and they've articulated him as such. In trying to, he's got so many different. His list of powers in the comics is so long that
they're godlike.
They are exactly. so that's exactly it. In that it's basically whatever he can imagine he can do. Ultimately, is what it comes down to, and then then there's limitations on it, and he can't deceive people, or he can't lie. If he says his word or some shit, like there's limitations on it, but it's like within the realm context of its own power.
Lucifer always seemed interesting because even if he gave somebody his word, there was always some loose interpretation that he could kind of like bend into the situation and be like, oh yeah, well, we didn't stipulate how.
And then those people
end up suffering because they made the assumption that it was going to be something else.
Yeah, that's where the comics were much more episodic with that type of thing about showing the people who succumbed to his wiles and died because of it. They don't necessarily show that a lot on the TV show.
Yeah, the TV show's too fast.
Yeah,
they try to cram it all in too fast. That's the difference between storytelling mediums.
I feel like the TV show felt like it could get taken off of the air at any second. So they were trying to... That's what they felt like they were writing, where they're like, I don't know how we're on the air right now, so we'll just, write 110 miles an hour through this plot. And yeah, because it feels like at the end of every season, if that season ended there,
it could have ended and been fine.
Yeah. They wrapped it up and closed it, but left it open at the same time somehow.
That's like, It's one of those things. As soon as I realized that, it's like, oh, this felt like a last episode.
Yeah.
This felt like a last episode. You get like 3 or 4 of them in a row in a season. It's like, man, it's whatever's going on there. It sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then lo and behold, they get renewed for another season, and then the entire next season feels the exact same way. And so you have an entire season of season finales.
Yeah, basically. Well, and then they got canceled and then brought back. Yeah. But anyway, back to Joker. And this is still in the DC universe. We never left the DC universe, funny enough. I think this is where what we're starting to see is I only think the people who are impressed with the film are
impressed for the right reasons.
White male dudes.
Oh.
I guess male dudes is redundant, but I guess there's female dudes. There's definitely female dudes.
Yeah, I think that dude is a fairly broad descriptor in terms of, like, personality.
Yeah.
And interpersonal behavior.
Yeah, but in that, I think the dude bros who think they're woke also are the ones that are praising Joker for being more than it actually is. Because if you actually break it down, I personally looked at it, and most of it is him dancing around and smoking cigarettes. That's like 90 minutes of the fucking...
He was smoking the entire time.
Yeah. And then, so with the dancing thing...
I'm not sure if I remember seeing Joker smoking.
No,
comics
this
at all.
This is this whole thing. That's what... To me, that was the most egregious part of the film, is the cigarettes. But then the dancing, what I think was happening was, in his head... He was writing well, the metaphor is that he's making his own symphony of life, and then when he's doing things right, he can hear the music, and that's when he starts dancing. So when there's all these things happening, it's chaos. It's his symphony of life, and it's supposed to be this big, fucking. The metaphor is supposed to be profound and philosophically powerful, but simultaneously nihilistic and about nothing, which is a paradox.
The cigarette thing reminded me of his other movie, the Johnny Cash movie, Walk the Line. Except it made me think of that, but in clown face.
Yeah.
Like, I know that Johnny Cash smoked cigarettes like all his life, but Joaquin Phoenix's cigarette smoking depiction is incredible. Like, that's got to be the best product placement for cigarettes. I feel like there's been a generation of movies where they were like, no cigarettes, no smoking, not even cigars. The only people who smoke are bad guys.
In Turkey, they'll put flowers over them, and if they're like broadcasting on TV.
Really?
Yeah, it's straight censored. You're not allowed to show shit. That's if it's an old movie.
Yeah.
They'll straight put a flower or some shit over it.
No shit.
Yeah.
And
it makes it look real dumb. But this is to me why the film felt as if what it was trying to do was antagonize the critics who were going to criticize it without watching it, because then the things that they criticized about it weren't the actually offensive things about it. To me, like I said, the cigarettes were the most offensive thing about it, because as we know, we're not supposed to be glorifying that, and that's one of the main things that we're seeing this dude do the entire time. And they're making it look cool with the lighting and the shadows and him sitting in his cloud of smoke and taking the long drag and getting the accent on the timing before he exhales and then goes into his diatribe. They know what they're doing with that, because Hollywood has perfected making cigarettes look sexy. But then, like you were alluding to, they had to stop doing it for the sake of the kids, for the sake of the children. And this is kind of where now, because this movie is trying to do all of these things to make itself be borderline offensive, but not actually go over the full line of offensive, to be, it's not in a NC-17, it's not X-rated. It's a rated R film in the light art that it could be PG-13 in my opinion, just because of the modern context. Like,
Yeah.
there's about 10 people that got killed. There's about 10 times that many that get killed in an Avengers film. It's just the depiction of it slightly more dark in the Joker stuff. In that the realism makes people less sensitized to it than when somebody gets killed and it's washed.
Yeah.
So there's all these things about it.
It didn't have any of the classic superhero movie vibe. It wasn't scrubbed clean like that.
Right.
And it wasn't shiny. It was grungy and dirty and dingy, and New York looks like that.
Yeah.
And so they did a good job of creating a dingy Gotham. That's the thing that I think I appreciated about it, is that they made Gotham look as nasty as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Gotham is dirty.
Yeah.
It's got all sorts of nasty shit all over it. It's not supposed to be a clean place.
It's supposed to be poison.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where, to me, the Gotham TV show has done the best job of making that
obvious. Very clear.
Well, it's not obvious to the casual Batman fan.
Yeah.
But to the person who's observant and is open to comic book lore, this is the Gotham TV show is the first time Gotham's personality and
Gotham
actually
TV show
came
is fantastic.
alive.
Like, I think that the way that they translated Doctor Strange is just like,
spot on.
Oh, it's like immaculately executed. He creeped me out the second they showed his face before they even let you know who he actually is. It's like that's Hugo Strange.
Well, and they invented a new character in that the last time a TV show was able to invent a new character was the Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
In the animated series, and I think that's where if you can add something new to the Batman universe, you've done something special. Because by the time Fish Mooney comes back the second time, people actually enjoy Fish Mooney's character because she added something to the universe.
Yeah.
And in that, I think that's where it's not easy. It's not easy. That universe is so tight knit.
Well, I mean, it can't be easy to imagine a character that fits in with that group of crazy people.
Mm-hmm.
All of the primary characters in Gotham are sociopaths or psychopaths or just, unfortunately, they're in Gotham. That's just it.
Yeah.
You should even the super wealthy, they're at constant risk of being blown up or shot or gassed because the Joker uses fucking chemical weapons.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that people forget that is in his arsenal. He has those little. At some point, there's a version of Joker that has little clown head grenades that gas everyone, make them laugh to death.
Yep. Well, that's one of the they used to laugh and gas as one of the storylines on the TV show.
Yep.
Yeah, and then that's how the second Joker is created.
Yep.
And he gets an overdose of the laughing gas.
Yeah, he takes too much. Don't get high on your own supply. Well, that's the thing, is like that's why I feel like there's the Joker as a psychological profile that can emerge as the result of like stress, mental illness, falling through the cracks, not being noticed, all of the things. There's a spectrum or a complex group of just things have to occur for the soup to be right. Yeah. For the Joker to emerge.
Well, and even then they added the Ace Chemicals scenario into it. So they did the full on psychological profile and then the Ace Chemicals bow on top. Because
there's a place beyond Joker that's crazier than Joker, but nobody wants to hang out with that guy.
Right.
And there's a place that's less crazy than the Joker, but he doesn't get shit done like the Joker gets it done. It's like it's a narrow band of psychopathy where there's like supreme cognitive ability is retained before they go overboard. And it's actually, this is where I feel like Jared Leto's Joker goes a little too far. He's like too far into crazy. He's actually my favorite in terms of film Jokers, because he's the only one that has ridden the fucking helicopter, the burning helicopter, to the ground and walked away. To me, that's Joker.
Yeah.
That's like quintessential. Like, he's so crazy. His superpower is craziness. He's so crazy that doesn't even exist to him.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that he's so mind bent that physics don't apply to him the same way they do to anyone else.
Well, and then I'm not sure where they were trying to go with that one, but it felt like they might be setting up that he had either killed Jason Todd or was Jason Todd.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting in that I think that might have also played into it.
Why he can walk away from a burning helicopter, because he's trained by Batman.
Exactly.
Well, that makes sense too, because in that story, in that Batman universe, what is it, Ben Affleck?
Yeah.
He's not a young Batman.
No.
And so that would actually have allowed for,
because they had the Robin statue, so it wasn't clear if they were going to try to do Red Hood or do a variation on that.
Ooh, Jared Leto as Red Hood would be fucking awesome.
Well, I mean, and that's where what I guess the possibility was that they adopted the Red Hood story for that version of Joker.
Well, there's another one where Joker apprehends, it's like a Batman Beyond storyline where Joker had apprehended one of the previous Robins and beat him a lot, and then brainwashed him, but also like implanted his mind into his brain. What was his name? Jesse? Is that the Batman Beyond? Anyways, he's like, they're all working.
Is it Terry?
Terry, that's it. They're all like working towards like figuring out who's causing these problems, and it turns out to be this, former Robin that had been beaten summarily by the Joker, and he was able to become the Joker because that broke him. There's a lot of that's why I feel like there's something about Joker in itself as like the thing that makes this latest incarnation so special is that in a lot of ways it gets to be like the an origin story. This is how we see Joker emerge. We can't really re-envision what's the guy who was in the Adam West Batman stuff. We can't really envision his birth anymore. It's way past that. But we've seen so many other births of the Joker, but this one is different. This is like as you've described pretty well, is like, falling through the cracks, social collapse. I think that's what makes it unique. But I agree, it definitely needs to have, it needs to have more. This can't be the end of that version of Gotham.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they've wasted several hours
just a waste
of everyone's time.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to. If it doesn't go anywhere, then it's a complete waste of everyone's time.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
then it's
make
a vanity
enough,
piece.
Exactly, because it doesn't make enough actual philosophical statement to warrant the film beyond an origin story. So unless it's just a really good origin story for Joker, the social commentary isn't enough to have it be a stand. That's kind of where, again, this is why to me the only people who've seen it as prolific are this population of white dudes who feel like they identify with him.
There are people out there who think that Joker and Harley's relationship is a model relationship. So
yeah.
Just because they get along and fight together doesn't. People shouldn't be modeling relationships after them.
Yeah. I feel like those people don't actually read comic books or watch the movies either.
Yeah. Because
they just look at images
yeah,
and see the
them smiling at each other.
yeah
But those are their crazy faces.
yeah.
They're just looking at each other with crazy
Because
faces.
I can't count. I can count. Well, I can't count the number of times Joker has thrown Harley under the bus.
Okay, so recently I watched Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Uh huh.
It was actually pretty good. I actually enjoyed it. It was one of those like, wait, Turtles and Batman?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this should be good because that means a Batman Shredder fight, and that was actually pretty satisfying. And Batman, of course, can waylay the Turtles because he's Batman, and it takes all four Turtles to take on the Shredder. So that was kind of cool too. There, expectations met. Where are they going to take this story? And there was this mutagen that brings out people's, somehow they assign them animals to turn into.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not quite sure how that kind of worked out. It was costume based. Obviously Batman turns into a bat, but they turned Harley into a hyena with a giant smile, giant head, and it was actually perfect. And it reinforced that's just her face. She's not actually smiling. She's just got this giant mouth full of teeth, and that's what it looks like when she's resting. She has a resting, smiling, crazy face. And so when you just said that, people who see images of Joker and Harley looking at each other, it's like they're just. I mean, he's a snake and she's a hyena, and that's what they look like.
Yeah.
People don't realize that because the vast majority of us are not comic book readers. I have fallen off the comic book train because I don't have time. I try to consume it through PDFs, but it's hard to keep up with that too. Because then it's the same amount of time actually. Now that I think about it, I just don't spend money on gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a hobby you can do without putting a lot of time into it.
Yeah. Right now I'm trying to find new music. So.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beauty of all these comic book shows is that
Right.
they've figured out a way to put it into some kind of visual communication that allows me to have it going on in the background and enjoy it and get something out of it.
Yeah, because I mean,
Also, instant replay is dope.
Well, they have the many comics now. People have posted online where they're reading them along with the panels, or even there's motion comic variations.
Yeah, motion comics are pretty cool.
Yeah, but it's not the same as watching live action or cartoon for that matter.
Holy crap! I saw. Oh God, what was it? It was like a Justice League episode or Superman movie. It was just a clip of it, but he was getting waylaid and has to unleash this full potential power, or what they kind of project as his full powers, and it was one of those man, this is one of those episodes when they realize, man, we gotta nerf him because he's too powerful. And I think it was it was like an example. It was on YouTube. I think there's definitely a phase where some of these characters got too powerful.
Yeah, they go in and out. There's marked periods where they reduce their powers, with Superman specifically, because then in the movies, I think that's where they gave him the capacity to fly faster than light originally, and then they ported it over to the comics for a while, and then his powers got too out of control, and then they had to reduce them. So that's when they killed him off, they started him basically back at zero and built him up from there.
Yeah, my understanding of when he dies is from then on he has to recharge, and it's about exposure to our sun.
Yeah, but then they take him on this trajectory where, after, over the next 5 to 10 years, he builds up back to godlike powers again, and then they do some because it all usually coincides with crisis arcs that they do every 10 years.
It was like
10 to 20 years.
I think it was like 10 years ago. It was Superman All-Star, where he has to stop some group of missiles that Luthor sends to the sun to blow up the sun, or somebody's trying to blow up the sun, and he stops it. But the goal wasn't to destroy the sun or do anything to the sun. It was to get Clark so close to the sun that he became overcharged. And so what happened is, like, throughout the episode, he's like becoming more and more powerful, and he starts to disintegrate. Essentially, he's turning into pure energy. And Lex gets this potion that allows him to function like Superman, and then like he takes it, and he finally understands everything. He like finally understands all of existence. He's like asks Clark, he's like, "Is this what it's like for you all the time?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "God, if I'd have only known, I would have done so many things differently."
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, this gets back to, I feel like if people like Superman but don't watch Supergirl,
Oh, they're missing out.
they're not real fans, and this is where it gets back to like
Kal-El's cousin is older than he is.
right, yeah.
Like,
I mean, they even bring him on the show, but it's the same thing with Batwoman, where if you claim to be a Batman fan but you're not watching Batwoman, you're not a real Batman fan, because it's the same shit just with a woman.
Except she's not like Bruce. She's different.
She's exactly like Bruce.
Well, no, she's a sociopath. but
that's what I was getting at, and when I was watching, I'm like, oh, she's a womanizer. She's like not trusting of authority.
Yeah.
Like everything, she's all the stuff they do with Bruce Wayne. She's exactly in Kate Kane, and
yeah,
it's just a woman.
Yeah.
She rides around. I mean, she rides around on a motorcycle.
Have they retained the being kidnapped and sister being killed backstory? Or have they even explored that stuff yet?
They've built it off of that, but they're changing it. So the first villain is
Deathstroke gonna be in this one too?
Probably.
I feel like you can't really have a Batman universe without the League.
I mean, he's in Titans.
Yeah.
Like, he's the main villain in Titans.
He's like trying to kill everyone though. He wants to take over the League of Shadows.
Now we find out. We thought.
Even though we know Damian can like take him in a sword fight, so it's like kind of.
But we find out that Dick thought he killed Jericho.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, Deathstroke thought that Dick wanted to kill Jericho, so there's all these elements of now what they're doing with Titans is, making it, with all the stuff they did with especially the Hawk and Dove Robin period, where he's not working with Batman and drawing all these like gray areas. In the last, did you see? I don't know if you saw the last episode.
I'm up to episode 6.
Fucking Robin's gone full on batshit insane.
Okay, that must be episode 7.
Yeah, I think it is episode 7. But yeah, that's where they're.
Well, he just watched the clone get shot with kryptonite bullets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's 6. So.
Yeah, that's the last thing I remember seeing. I thought Crypto was rendered perfectly. Crypto was like made me smile the entire time.
Well, they executed it perfectly for sure, and that's kind of where now, when we have a TV show that's executing Crypto like that,
Is he the Boy Wonder, or because he's not really Superboy? Is he? Is he Superboy?
No, because he's
the clone.
He's half Lex.
Yeah, he's like.
Yeah.
Clark Luthor.
Connor Kent.
Yeah, Connor Kent.
Because he has
memories.
Both of their memories.
Yeah.
But also
that scene when they try to storm in Lex Luthor's father's house and he waylays the tactical special ops team or whatever. That was actually really satisfying.
Yeah.
I liked how when they introduced him, he was just like didn't know anything about anything. He was like confused about everything, but just seemed to pick things up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like went from like getting scolded for stealing a T-shirt to figuring out how to ride a bus across the country from wherever he is to get to the middle of Kansas.
Yeah.
And then find a random farm. Like,
well, I think that's supposed to highlight his memories.
yeah. And his intelligence,
or his how genetic memory works.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know how, because then
he recited the
yeah.
fusion or fission or fusion reaction information. Like, how did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're doing a really good job with Titans. Like, once I was kind of curious, like, when are they going to reveal Raven? When are they going to reveal Starfire's like real powers? Because she can fly.
Yeah.
And Raven can do a whole hell of a lot more. Raven should be able to like black out the screen and leave 2 or 3 red dots and have a whole bunch of people screaming in terror.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you just start off there, then there's nowhere to go.
That's true. I'm waiting. That's why I'm kind of curious, because like
to see this like emergence of Nightwing, which is it's obvious it's gonna happen. You can't have 2 Robins the entire Titan series. That's just not gonna work.
Yeah, no.
But the way they're setting it up,
I feel like Nightwing doesn't get to happen until like well, no, there already was a Nightwing series, and it got screwed. They had like there's a Nightwing. I've seen. Well, maybe
is it a cartoon?
No, let me find it real quick.
What was it on? I feel like I remember that being announced at some point and just like tanking immediately.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, Nightwing, the series, had 5 episodes.
You remember Mantis?
Mantis.
Mantis was pretty fun.
Oh, it was a web series. It wasn't a DC or Warner Brothers thing. That's why. Well, that explains it.
Yeah.
It wasn't even legit at that point.
Oh yeah, they had some pretty good choreography on there though.
I remember watching it and being really entertained by it, but it didn't take off.
Yeah, because they had legit like Eskrima on there.
Yeah. And you can't really. Yeah, I guess now you can because of Game of Thrones, but apparently Nightwing's not allowed. I thought that was like part of the sword training for the people in Game of Thrones.
Oh, maybe so. Yeah. Makes sense.
No, I remember watching the Nightwing, like there were only 5 episodes. I remember watching thinking like, oh, this is cool, and then that was it, and I didn't ask any questions because, we've had a buffet of comic book shows to watch for the last several years. I don't think that we've ever had it so good in terms of comic book television translations.
Yeah. Yeah, this gets back to that whole Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. In that the way they've set up the different Earths in the first place, the multiverse.
Yeah.
And they've played around with it, and they did the Crisis on Earth X, where Earth X is, not Bizarro, but it's like the Nazi win.
Yeah. I liked when what is it? Heroes of Tomorrow or whatever. Legends, yeah. When the Legends of Tomorrow, they were like it was like the Crisis event last year, a couple of years ago or whatever it was. Like they have Freeze alive, but he's from one of the other realities, and he's like a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really cool actually for that to be brought into the story. It's like, oh yeah, well on this Earth he's actually a hero, but on your Earth he's just like a bank robber who gets caught a lot for some stupid repair.
Well, and it's funny that they brought those dudes in from Prison Break.
Yeah.
As a team where.
But they made them have like these really like overdone accents.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that part was fun too.
Yeah.
It's it's that they're trying to do the crime boss, like the prohibition-era crime boss voice.
Yeah, totally. It was a very meta usage of character building. Yeah. But yeah, this is kind of where the DC Berlanti verse has done a really good job of creating a comic book universe that feels like comic books come to
Man,
life.
the amount of planning that has to go into something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to have convergent storylines and multiple character backgrounds developed that have enough like activity in their development so that they make sense.
Mm-hmm. And then people change their lives trajectories to not line up with that, because then Kid Flash, the dude that plays him, decided he wanted to leave the show at one point, and then he wanted to come back, and they wrote him out and wrote him back in.
Mother.
Well, and the same shit happened with the dude Roy.
I feel like
on Arrow.
Yeah, I feel like if it's not like Chekhov in Star Trek where his character is done because he literally died in real life.
Yeah, it's definitely not the same.
Yeah, like it's like I feel like if somebody has the opportunity to be a part of some kind of like a storytelling, production company that makes that kind of story, that's like, fuck yeah, how could you not want to do something like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, it feels as if there's some sort of betrayal of the audience when people decide to take on a role and then decide to leave before
they're done.
Before the story's done.
Yeah.
Because then...
or till it gets shut down.
Yeah. Because then, in the one case, the one dude left because somebody outed him without... It wasn't from the show, but somebody just outed him, and he didn't want to be in the spotlight anymore. I'm like, okay, I get that. But then it was with the other dude, he came out and then left the show, so nobody outed him. He outed himself and then left the show. But then he came back, so that's where that's where it's like, what?
Oh, man.
Why are you doing this to the audience? You fucked up the storyline. And nobody cared. Nobody was gonna. This is 20 whatever it was. Like nobody was gonna care that those people were gay enough to stop. Like what did they think they were gonna stop watching the show or protest? I don't know what they thought was gonna happen. And obviously it's a personal choice to step out. But
yeah, I mean like
it felt
CW is not a Hallmark channel.
Greg Berlanti's gay.
Yeah, no, I know, that's what I mean. Like
the dude who's organizing the entire DC universe on TV is gay.
Yeah, but
like,
even then, like the primary network that's like distributing the content.
Oh, it's definitely not the Hallmark Channel. But I mean,
they're not the Hallmark Channel. They're not.
So
they're not Lifetime. They're not like
Greg Berlanti's gay. You'll notice in his shows, they go out of their way to normalize homosexuality. In that, random characters will have homosexual partners just to normalize it.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, in that universe, if somebody's coming out,
yeah, like
you're in the most welcoming environment in the fucking world.
Constantine's always checking out the dudes.
Oh, yeah. I think he's straight. I think he's openly bi in that universe.
He cracks me up. He's always checking people out.
Because because they have him. His biggest regret is he sent his ex-lover, who's a male, to hell.
Yep.
And they explore that storyline, and
he flirts in one of the crossover Infinite or Crisis episodes. They have him flirting with Freeze, I think, or Freeze's partner, and he's like, sorry, I'm taken. And Constantine's like, well, Yeah.
Yeah, which in that universe,
That's
I feel like if somebody's
Sure,
an
why
actor's
not?
coming out in real life, they, that's not the place where you need to take time off.
no. That's a place where people are encouraged to wear tights
Right,
and makeup.
yeah, and be as flamboyant as
Be
possible
as flamboyant as imaginable. Like,
for the sake of the story.
yeah, like, really?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's like the theater class dream, right?
Right. Yeah. You would think, but
It's
that's
supposed
why.
to be.
That's why I think it. That's why it felt so weird, as if those weren't real. Those in 20, the year whatever 20 it was, it didn't feel like a real excuse as to why they were leaving the show. It's like, so
Yeah.
what's really going on, guys? What's going on? Did somebody threaten you? What happened? Because the coming out is not a real.
Where did they touch you? Show me on this doll.
Even that, like, people weren't, that's in the Me Too era. People
Yeah.
weren't leaving. If they were the ones that got touched, they weren't the ones that
No,
leave.
they
It
were
was
trying-
the one that was the offender that
they were
was
trying
leaving.
to drive out the toucher.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So that's where I'm like, in those stories, when bravo to the writers for being able to accommodate those people and then not making them feel bad for coming back, because both of those dudes came back. Actually, they wrote both of those dudes back into the fucking story, which they didn't have to do.
That's really cool of them, though.
Yeah,
That's, like,
that's what I
super
mean.
cool.
In that, clearly the writers of that universe care about the actors and actresses in a way,
and they know the characters well enough that they can be agile with the development of the stories.
yeah.
and
they would. So this is where you look at Next Generation. When they wrote off Yar, it was because they couldn't come to an agreement behind closed doors. So they just wrote her off, and then when the writers had changed, that's when they brought her back. And the same thing with Crusher. When you have writing crews that have agendas and don't get along, they will write the fucking people off in a heartbeat.
Well, that's Shondaland to the T. The producers of Grey's Anatomy. There were a bunch of shows that she was doing for a while. She like owned Thursday night, like all Thursday night on ABC from like whatever, like 6 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
There was like all of her shows at one point.
Damn.
Like, yeah. And so, Grey's Anatomy has been on for like 14 or whatever, 15 seasons. It's been on the air for a long fucking time. It's like the longest running medical drama now. It beat ER. So.
It's not General Hospital.
Yeah, I think General Hospital doesn't count or something.
Yeah, right. That's right, yeah.
Even though Grey's Anatomy is also a soap opera. So it's kind of like...
You lying to yourselves, guys.
Yeah. But, these shows can go on for a long time. And they develop a lot of, complex narratives. And at some point, they just don't have... They get tired of somebody, so they write them out. And in that show, they're conveniently kill them.
Yeah.
Because it's a hospital and people have accidents. So, like, car accident or gets hit by a bus or something falls on them or they have brain cancer or, really fucked up shit. And then sometimes they survive.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the times where they try to make you think that they're going to kill off, like, the mainline characters. And it's like, go ahead, find out what happens to the viewers who are only watching for that one person.
This isn't the Game of Thrones viewership.
No, this is like 14 years of dedicated, I'm here for one character now because you've killed off all of my other favorite characters. And, yeah. So that's actually a really cool thing when the writing teams are agile and they know the characters well enough to, like, send them away and then bring them back and can work with that because people's lives get in the way sometimes. I think that a lot of it's easy to forget that the actors and actresses are the age where they're trying to have kids and have families too. And so sometimes people get to take time off for their families, and that's acceptable because if it's not, then we've got a really fucked up society.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you're saying, there's this period where you're expected to sort of work through your prime and not take time off, but that is not
It
it's
doesn't
not
actually work.
possible. Yeah, without
No.
burnout, everybody gets burnt out if they try to do that.
It only works for less than 3% of the population.
Yeah, and then those people end up with colon cancer.
Yeah.
From the
Yep.
stress.
Yep.
Or some shit like
Well,
that.
I think one of the guys that's running for president, he's like a tech billionaire, but as soon as he got to a certain point with money, he went all full environmentalist. I think his name's like Tom Steyer or something like that. Yeah, that's all. That's all.
Is he still running?
I don't even know. I just remember watching when
I heard a couple people had dropped out. That's why I'm like,
Yeah.
Might not be.
Well, he was the guy. I tuned into the Democratic soundbite recording session that they televised, and he stood out to me because he was like talking about the environment. He was the only person who was talking about the environment. Everyone's like arguing about how do we compromise on the healthcare upgrade that they're not going to get passed, and they're forgetting. Oh no, and of course people are also trying to talk about how they know what to do. And it's like, motherfucker, if you know what to do this whole time, why haven't you fucking done something?
Right. Yeah, that's my problem.
And then
with all these
and this
people.
one guy though, and it's funny because like they're all complaining about the super wealthy. There's a bunch of millionaires complaining about billionaires.
Right.
But there's one billionaire on the stage, and he's like, you know what? I agree with everything that y'all are saying. I shouldn't have this much money, and that's why I put all this money into environmental efforts. And it's like, that was the one guy. Actually, no, Andrew Yang, he also reiterated the whole, like, I don't know what to do, but I know we have a problem, and I want to look for solutions. But he's I don't think that it was like if that had been the elevator pitch, it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
And
Americans want false security and confidence.
I can't buy what he pitches. I like what he says.
He's too honest.
I like what he says on paper, and I like the idea of what he's pushing, but it's just like, man.
He's too honest for America.
Yeah. But this one guy, the environmentalist billionaire, there's something about that I really enjoyed for some reason, because I felt like he was the one. He was one of these things is not like the others.
Yeah.
It's like, how did they sneak this fucking environmentalist Green Party dude on the stage with all these Democrats? Like, really, how?
It's really I'm what's it called? Extinction Rebellion.
Oh God.
Yeah, I'm really starting to wonder how serious this movement can be taken when all of the people who are leading it are some of the biggest carbon offenders. Those people at the Democratic debate, they didn't fly there on coach.
They have private jets.
Yeah. Yeah, at least half of them.
And then they have entourages that travel with them too.
At least half of them. So that's where I'm
pretty sure that billionaire guy has his own jet.
Yeah, of course that dude does.
He has a pilot, a co-pilot, a flight attendant, himself.
There's
like as many as 8 people on that plane.
I know Bernie
maybe.
Sanders takes coach
So
at least sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know if he does all the time. But in that, I think he does it to prove he doesn't have 2 houses, which he does, or to trick people into thinking he doesn't have 2 houses. Because that's where, to me, then when he turns around, he's like, "Oh, you write a successful book too." No. You don't get to play that card, buddy.
Yeah, that only works if you have like that level of visibility and like have been solidified in the public.
No, even then, if somebody writes a book and makes $1 million off of a book, they know how much money went into marketing, which either they had to put into it or somebody else put into it.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with the actual quality of the book. It has to do with how much that book got promoted, how many book clubs were saying, this is the book of the week, how many curricula were putting this book in there. And then you take all those things into account and then say, oh, did you put $0 into that? Did you have 0 funds from which to market that, and then you made $1 million? Because then, if that was the case, then you can say that to other people. Because if not, then it's a false sense of accomplishment from which you're scolding people for not becoming a millionaire to then turn around and then start talking about how other people need to spend their money. Because that's where I'm like, I agree with the principle, but when you got 2 fucking houses and you're trying to tell me you got there because you wrote a successful book, guess what? I wrote a fucking book too, but it's getting buried. I can't advertise it on Amazon because it has shit in the title. I literally can't advertise my book on Amazon because it has shit in the title. So when I'm saying, oh, I'm supposed to be able to sell $1 million worth of books, but I literally can't advertise because they changed the rules. So if somebody happens to want to call something bullshit, oh, you can't advertise it on Amazon. It doesn't matter what the word is. If it's considered vulgar, you can't advertise on Amazon now. If his book got in before that change, he's not even subject to the same rules as me. He wasn't. So that's where I'm like, as somebody now who wrote a book and released it, who can't advertise it on fucking the platform on which I released it, how are you then going to turn around and tell people like me, like, anything about economics, because you don't know what it's like? That's the thing about it, is when I have people who are trying to tell me how to exist who don't understand what it's like.
He's got like a couple million followers on Twitter at least, right?
Yeah.
And he's a highly visible senator who's been around for a long time.
Too long.
Yeah.
Too fucking long.
I think that that alone should have guaranteed that he sold 1 million copies of his book.
Yeah.
Alone. Because there are 340 million of us in this country. And at least half of us know how to read, right? That's just, I'm just spitballing. At least half of the country can read at a level sufficient to have, consumed his book. And let's assume that of that half of those are not interested. And so there's at least a quarter of that. Well, that's still like 75 million fucking people who could have, in theory, read it. And so even if only like 1% of that, 750,000 people read that, that's still a lot. Which is really like 0.025% of the population at that point. Like, it doesn't take that much, but he's got a huge ass platform, so he should have been able to sell that much. Not everyone has that platform.
No. And in that's where I don't know how I feel about someone who has job security through oligarchies.
Man, federal service should be like jury duty.
Yeah.
You get a call and say, you've been selected to function as your state representative for the next 2 years.
How was it like that in Athens 2,000 years ago, but it's not like that now?
That's the way it should be. It shouldn't, and it should be like a nominal stipend, and you go live at the state house or wherever the bunk where they put you, and you have an office, and it's a freaking administrative job where you like execute the will of the people, not tell them what you think because there's some deeper conversation going on in the state house. It's not. We've got this fucked up system where everything's turned around because somehow people have confused our elected officials, our elected representatives, as something that they're not.
Yeah.
It says nowhere in the Constitution that they are our leaders, just our representatives.
They're supposed to be our servants.
Yeah, they're our civil servants.
They're supposed to be our servants.
They are our employees.
Yeah, and that's the fucked up part about where we're at now is this is why, to me, the notion of how things are playing out when you have the people on the right who are trying to get rid of government for whatever reason. I don't even try to understand the right wing anymore, to be honest. And this is kind of why I don't generally speak about them, because it's like, do you spend your days talking about dumpster fires? I don't. So I
try to talk about music and synthesizers.
So that's where, in the sense of, if there's anything to be discussed worthy of note, especially in the context of politics, it's not going to be concerned with right wing to me, because that's already beyond way beyond repair. So anytime I discuss the left, people on the left tend to get mad because I don't criticize the right. But I don't. Like I said, I don't. It's a waste of time. But in that, when you criticize the left policies, what I've found is that people then automatically assume you're right wing in a way that makes it impossible to actually criticize left wing policies. So then it becomes this problem of...
Oh yeah, didn't you know that if you don't support the entire DNC platform, you're not actually a Democrat?
Yeah, because then you get shit like Hillary Clinton coming out and accusing Tulsi Gabbard, who served this country as a fucking soldier, like her or not. She fucking served this country. You can't call... If you didn't serve this country...
They get vetted pretty hard.
Right. If you did not serve this country in war, you cannot come out and accuse somebody who did as being a fucking potential Russian agent without being the biggest fucking hypocrite on the planet. Yeah. That is some shit where I'm like, whoa. When you have Hillary Clinton supporters... now spouting that bullshit rhetoric about Tulsi Gabbard too now. I don't like Tulsi Gabbard, bro. No, I don't like her positions. She's done some horrible shit.
She backed some anti-gay marriage
Exactly.
shit.
She used to be a fucking Republican.
It's like straight up. So like, I remember when there was some commotion about an Indianapolis representative, or maybe it was the governor. Somebody wanted to march in the Pride Festival in Indianapolis, and they're like, no thank you, like you haven't been here supporting us this entire time, you don't get to benefit from the platform that we've developed. And I thought that was like one of the most fantastic ways of explaining how this actually works. Like, you don't get to develop a career that seeks to limit the rights of a group of people and then all of a sudden decide that you're like, in favor of civil rights just because you need their help.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's like
fuck you, Joe Biden.
That motherfucker. Like, I'm not going to complain about the Rave Act because raves were questionable parties at best, but
I mean, fuck about segregation,
segregation, busing? The busing bullshit, the fucking like making it impossible to discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy. That guy's created legislation that's ruined a generation of people. That basically he took away the safety net that preceding generations had. He took it away and isn't sorry about it. Doesn't even want to acknowledge that these are contributing factors to the way that a generation is like dealing with the economy.
No. Well, I frame it this way. I had to work during college and still came out with debt. That wouldn't have been possible 60 years ago.
Yeah.
If you worked during college, you wouldn't come out with debt. Or if you had debt, it's because you didn't work during college. And then when you came out, you'd be able to pay down that debt because you got an actual paying job proportionate to your debt. Those things are not possible for most people today directly because of his actions. So when this dude's coming in trying to be the fucking candidate in 2020,
I know how to fix
like,
this shit.
Fuck all the way out of here. Fuck all the way out of here, Joe Biden.
That his whole everything that I heard him say on the debate was essentially like, I know how to solve these problems because I've been there before. And it's like, wait, what?
Because he created them.
Yeah.
This is to me where like
this is the whole like create the problem, solve the problem.
Yeah.
Like,
so what I'm having, my biggest problem is all of the people who are saying the world is the worst than ever in 2016 after when the He Who Shall Not Be Named became president. Y'all were ignoring black folk the entire time because all the shit that now is in the limelight, we've been having to deal with this entire time. That's why black people are fucking tired and not even caring about this shit because we've been dealing with it. Like, black people are not... Like, the shit we're upset about right now is getting murdered by police. That's about it, because that's the same shit we've been dealing with for, like, since fucking slavery that's not been taken care of.
Insistence that black men should just be passive and do what they're told is it's like telling women to not dress provocatively so they won't get raped.
It's the same. It's the same people
thing.
making those arguments. It's the same group making those arguments.
It's disturbing that people want to like. It's not a behavioral issue on the part. No, it's that we live in a society where the police are allowed to freak out essentially, and they're trained with firearms, but they're allowed to just start shooting, but untrained civilians have to remain calm with weapons
But here's
pointed at
my
them.
thing: as a black person, when that shit happens to black people every fucking day, when I hear people on the left talk about why we need to protect Kurds from that, do you know how many Kurds there are? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, but I remember reading something about about 7 to 8,000 of them were being shot at or something like that.
There's about 3 million Kurds in that region total. Total. Do you know how many black people there are in America?
More than 3 million.
More than 3 million. About 4 times that. A little over 4 times that.
Yeah.
So when you have people who are trying to get me to like allow our military to go bomb some more shit for 3 million people while they're actively ignoring the oppression of 14 fucking million people in their own home, how seriously am I supposed to take that as a black person? Because then those same people are the ones that try to scare me
into behaving subserviently and
because of the fear of the racist right wing. Because then they turn around and say, "Oh, we can't do anything about these racist cops. So you need to vote for the left because then we'll come and finally do something about these racist ass cops that have been here since the 18 fucking whatevers that we haven't done anything about
that exist to protect
Because
property.
then we can then go over and protect Kurds from those people, from those Turks who we actually armed in the first place. Because we armed those Turks.
Yep.
So
here's something that I think is really.
What am I supposed to think?
The other day I was reading this, and this is one of those like kind of disingenuous. Apparently, Turkey is holding nuclear weapons hostage. American nuclear weapons.
Do you know who's put those nukes there?
The United States.
Under who?
NATO.
Under which president?
Oh, Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So here's the other thing. They are one of our NATO allies.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if we disagree with them on policy. NATO, they're our NATO ally. If they say help, we come running. Like, that's actually how it works. So it's like, oh God, they're not holding anything hostage.
They not only
that's so disingenuous to say that that Turkey is posturing in some way because we've placed nuclear weapons at a missile base in Turkey.
Well, here's the thing. So when I lived in Turkey, You hear things in Turkey, and then those things never make it abroad to America because of the information filter. And then when you try to explain these things to Americans are like, no, there's no way that's even possible.
Of course it's possible.
what I'm about to say, like at one point in late 2015, early 2016, there was about I think 1,500 American soldiers taken hostage at Incirlik Air Base.
Yeah.
In the same base where these nukes are. And the issue was, this is at the time when they're doing there's the coups that are happening.
Oh, the Arab Spring stuff, right?
No, it's not necessarily connected to the Arab Spring stuff, because the coups that are happening are still not known to have been organic or whether they were contrived by the CIA to actually help consolidate power under Erdogan. Because the problem is, when you had the left wing supporting our ally, you had people on the left who were supporting Erdogan's consolidation of power, which at the time was negatively affecting the Kurds in Turkey, but not in Syria. So now his consolidation of power is negatively affecting the Kurds in Syria, but the people who want that to stop are the same ones who were approving his consolidation of power in 2015 and 2016 because it happened to be a left-wing candidate. So what's happening now is the the CIA is manipulating people's opinion of supporting despotic authorities via associating it with political parties via presidential candidacies, when in fact this stuff has nothing to do with who's in power as a president, but whether the American people support it has everything to do with who's in power as a president. Because now, you remember how Saddam was originally an ally against Iran?
Well,
he's originally an American ally against Iran because we wanted to keep Iran in check, so we propped up Saddam, and then he fucking got out of control.
When they thought that they could have like positive relations with Assad.
Exactly.
That's
exactly. It's the same. It's the same. But what happens is American attention span and historical knowledge is manipulated in a way that people who are the average Americans are not able to put these things together to see that there is a pattern of events that occurs when these things happen. So in the transition from Erdogan being an ally to being the next enemy of the state, he's been using American weapons and money the entire time. We've been paying for this circus.
I remember, I feel like I've heard or read many a general talk about how what we do is we deliver peace and freedom to like parts of the world that are being oppressed. But if we were to look at this from let's say that we're just a couple of space teenagers flying through the cosmos and we get some radio signals and just like, hey, let's go check this place out and tip a few cows and leave some fucking crop circles. And then we find this group of humans that are saying these words, peace, freedom, oppression, and all we see is destruction of historical artifacts and the infiltration of a culture and overtaking its economy and supplanting its economy with a foreign economy.
It's Orwellian.
Calling it industrialization and providing education. It doesn't matter what the words are. It's what the words are being used to describe, and the problem is that where everything is covered with like these polarizing glasses that restrict. It's like in They Live.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Where as soon as you have the glasses, you can see the truth, but even if the truth is obvious, it's in front of us.
Well, what's happened with that is there has been a virus that has injected the notion of individual opinion usurping reality, such that if you get the glasses, your notion of individuality will then fracture the truth into more infinite number of variations in which you believe your ego usurps reality.
So at that point, everything exists because you believe it to exist.
And that's
a psychosis.
That permutation, it is a psychosis, but it's a virus that then ruins the truth glasses.
Yeah.
So this is why information being subject to being corrupted takes the capacity for someone to actually be able to experience individuality, but also destroy the ego that is the virus, in that they're not the same thing. Individuality and ego are not the same thing.
Yeah.
But they are made such that the ego is being fed by the existence of the individual in a way that makes them disconnected, so that the ego is constantly driving everything and the individual is subject to the whims of the ego in a way that they're not even cognizant of. So this is why when people discover meditation and yoga, it becomes this mind-blowing experience, because then they're able to actually articulate like the difference between themselves as an individual identity and their ego in this thing that they fed to please everyone. In that, the ego, again, the ego is only a perception. It's only a perception of constructed identities, and a lot of that is meant to please and to move in between societal expectations one way or another. So in that, this is again why when people start to discover meditation, whether it's through acid or through yoga or through fucking poetry writing or whatever kind of way people learn to get into their actual stream of consciousness and separate the stream of consciousness from the chemicals and electrical impulses that are actually firing to create those things in a context that has been artificially constructed by society. Those things have been made to seem conflated and unable to be disconnected by a society that is ultimately hell-bent on putting the material above all, when the ethereal is its own thing, but because it can't be touched, it can't be quantified, so you can't pay for the ethereal until you can create a false ethereal experience.
You have to become a consumer of a concept or an activity so that you can become able to not consume.
Yep.
So that you're no longer.
That's the paradox. This person
you have to become the byproduct of.
You have to go through that process.
Of a process, so that you can get out of becoming of the
But
cycle
this is
itself.
also why samsara and reincarnation become these interesting concepts as to why being able to transcend it then makes one feel as if there's something larger in which humans are. We see ourselves as higher up in the process, but maybe that's because it's our ethereal body connected to the human body. But that's what the lore says, so then you have to disconnect yourself from the lore. And then, there's all these layers to it as to why our existence becomes this convoluted thing of not being able to tell if what we're feeling is from the context or reality. But this gets back as to why polluting the truth glasses distorts the capacity for people to then experience real truth.
Yeah.
So this is why, again, we're in this weird period of post-Orwell. We're trying to get to post-Orwellian, back to truth glasses, but the truth glasses are still polluted.
But we're getting pulled into Brave New World of information saturation.
Yeah.
Everything is in front of us. There's so much in front of us that even if a website were to present data taken directly from the government and utilize an API to translate a table directly from the government's website to their own website, if they're not an official recognized media source with a history of telling the truth and having credibility and all that kind of stuff, people won't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing this one. It was an election commission fundraising reporting, and they were showing how much money all of the candidates are taking in, and it's actually a lot less than I thought it would be. I thought everyone was doing a lot better than they are, apparently. But, it was from some, I've never heard of it kind of website. Anyone could have made this in 20 minutes with a template. It looked like a template news website. It didn't look like they did much to it. But they'd been using it long enough that all of the windows had been filled up. So it was a functional website. But it sucks because sometimes in the rush to get it out there first, people aren't able to utilize a stable platform that has is known to deliver a certain quality or meet a level of not excellence. I think the minimum standard for telling the truth consistently, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this gets back to the notion of if you're reading text, you're not watching the actual events.
Yep.
And then if you're watching the actual
filtered
events,
through somebody else's lens,
then you don't necessarily know the context. And then if you're getting the context, then it's the filter. So you have to almost get all of it to actually get the full picture.
Yeah.
And even then, there's going to be stuff that falls through the gaps. But then there's this notion of perception of being fully informed, which then people walk around feeling fully informed about a lot of things. Even down to the notion of the candidates for which they vote, they feel fully informed about them.
I'm at this point where whenever whenever I see something that's like, huh? I just find it interesting. And it's like, I wonder what this is. Because half the time I end up being really entertained, and I just find it amusing. I start laughing to myself as I read it. Because it's like, really? Is this what's going on? Are we really at this place where, like, everyone's attacking each other? There's, like, no unity? How do they expect this to work if there's no unity? They should all be agreeing with each other. If they all agreed with each other.
It's the ego, man.
Yeah.
It's that ego. Gets back to that ego.
Fucking ego.
But that's why, again, the left wing, it's been framed as herding cats. Well, it's just fucking pettiness. People on the left are too petty to put aside their differences to unify, and that apparently people on the right wing can put aside all their differences on whatever they're different on to just unify and hate.
I saw this thread where it was like I think it started out as an Impossible Meat thing, and people were talking about it, how it's like, like the beef industry, like 1 pound of beef requires like this many pounds of grass, and it's like you could stop showering for like 4 months or something like that, and you still wouldn't have like not used as much water as it takes to produce a hamburger. And incredible stuff. It's like, holy shit, really? This is the cost of a hamburger? It's like that much water? And so everyone's like all like, on the I'm a vegan, can't stand omnivores or meat eaters. They're ruining the environment. These are people that are convinced that people who aren't vegans are ruining the environment. And there's probably some really weird rationalization for this, and I'm not trying to explore that. But what I found really interesting was there's one person who said that not everyone is as far into the process as everyone else. Some people have fully embraced a different diet, and are doing it successfully, and they're not having any kind of weird physical reaction. They're not missing out vitamins or proteins or enzymes or amino acids. They're getting everything they need, and they're healthy. And so that person is doing it right. But not everyone is that person, and not everyone has that background yet. Not everyone is experienced enough to get there, like right away. It takes a while for some people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, have to be patient, because you can't just scare people off.
Yeah.
And that was like, man, if someone in the vegan community can have that kind of like clarity of interactivity, like, there's hope elsewhere, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the notion of food diet type communities existing is kind of weird in itself. We're in this weird era of tribalism where everything is a tribe in a way that is natural for the evolution of our species, but I think we're hitting a point of diminishing returns in that because everything has its own tribe, then every tribe has its own opposition.
Yeah.
So in creating a vegan tribe, you're going to create a natural opposition and the extreme opposite, the only meat eating, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
So in fact, I would argue that
there is actually a culture of people who eat raw meat.
What I was going to say is
just raw meat. Only raw meat.
I would argue the only reason those people exist is because veganism existed.
Wow.
And it's going to be hard to philosophically disprove that notion when you actually start to really break it down because of the way things work. What ends up happening is when you philosophically start to really break down the origins of these notions of diet and like the idea of having a proselytizable diet in the first place. The only reason the raw meat eating group will have become a thing is because veganism articulated itself along this locus, because before we had omnivores, carnivores, and herbivores as the basis for the eating types, and once it started going beyond that is only when you start getting the notion of the carnivore within the human that only eats meat, because carnivore is supposed to be a group that was across animals. I mean, because there's even carnivorous plants, so that's where it's like, it's supposed to be a a descriptor that goes across the animal kingdom and not just within humans. Like, technically, a gorilla's vegan, but technically it's just an herbivore. So this notion of
said something about gorillas.
Of a gorilla articulating itself as a vegan would then, like, if a gorilla articulated itself as a vegan, it would then create this counterbalance within its own culture.
Okay, so gorillas, they're vegans, right? Whatever. They eat nothing but vegetation, for the most part, that we know of. They might eat some grubs, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, no grubs, just vegetation. So they're vegans, and they're as built up and strong as they are, right?
Yeah.
I saw this meme. It's like a picture of Joe Rogan looking surprising. Like, gorillas don't know physical training techniques, so we don't actually know how, like, what their full strength is. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking about that because all they eat is vegetation. There's no, like, they're not getting, like, high protein shakes and eating creatine.
Well, it's a false. Well, I think we discussed this. It's a false premise because that assumes that the notion of high protein weightlifting results in the optimal results.
I know. But it was just kind of amusing to me. It's like they're not, like, hitting the gym and you know, doing.
Well, because this is where, again,
their activities are like,
it's body weight, and this is where what I was saying is that there's the strong possibility that if you do body weight constantly, you're gonna be stronger than the person who does
focused deadlifting
to failure. Yeah. Because if you don't go to failure and you're on a steady trajectory, you don't activate
all of the muscle fiber.
Yeah, and you never plateau.
Yeah,
and that's where you get to this notion of. I mean, it's the same thing with the bear. Bears aren't out fucking lifting weights. But a bear can run 35 miles an hour, and then pounds per square inch that it can exert is probably off the charts.
Yep.
So you have this combination of
incredible creatures.
Yeah,
incredibly
but
strong creatures.
They're not lifting weights. They're not in the gym.
Nope.
So again, this is where, to me, you know, I started mimicking animal movements in my workouts about a decade ago, and that's when I started going beyond the plateaus of what I was doing with traditional weightlifting, and I was getting injured less. So this is where, for example, if you're trying to build up your shoulders and your chest, yeah, you could do bench press and you could do shoulder press. Or you could flap like a fucking bird. You're going to look crazy. But guess what? Do you know how strong birds' pecs are? Like, I'm pretty sure proportionally?
They called them pecs. And
they did some sort of thing where if birds' pectoral strength were translated to humans, it would be about like 400 times. It was something stupid off the charts.
Well, we have like I think there's like a muscle mass thing going on. Like, they've got an incredible amount of muscle mass for the size of their skeletons.
But it doesn't start off like that.
But, no, I know. It develops to that.
Yeah.
But like the amount of muscle mass that we have for our pectorals are much smaller compared to our like skeletal system.
But if somebody flapped their entire life
and they got like bird pecs,
that's what I'm saying. But the thing is, we don't conceptualize
that.
Like
makes total sense, because I was watching this Australian gymnast talk about how to do muscle ups. You know, those crazy push-ups or pull-up looking things.
The dudes dudes or women who do rings.
Yeah, guys.
The rings,
the people who do rings, they can do it the best.
Jesus Christ! I mean, but have you seen their like upper body?
They're like full diamond shaped upper body,
their shape
and
is
trapezoid.
They're like double triangle.
Oh, it's incredible. But yeah, exactly. So like, I'm watching this guy do this thing, and he's like, you know, some people think that you got to do it slow so you can build the muscle mass up. It's like, no, but really the trick is to develop the synergy of muscle motion so that you can lift yourself up, transition, and then push yourself up all in one motion. And that's the trick. And then that's when you get the explosive power. So I'm watching him do it, and he's just like, it's like he doesn't have a body. It's just like he's two arms and some shoulders and a head, and he's just like flying up over and around this bar. And it's like, he's training to do it at that speed because that's the speed that he needs to do it at. And then, of course, I see one of his parkour videos, and he's like able to like basically run on his hands, and like that stuff's that's the thing, though. Is I think that I'm forever gonna be concerned with my lower back because of car accidents and lifting foolishly a couple times and not taking the right precautions. Really, that's really what did it to me. But like I find these exercises, and a lot of them they'll work to resolve like isolated musculature issues that I have, and then so I'll kind of work that into my routine until it goes away, and then if it comes back, then I can start keeping it as far as the routine. And it's really the challenge, I think, is identifying like really what to focus on and how to move all of it together. Because I feel like if I were to try and like move some weights, I'd just fucking hurt myself. I'm just being realistic about it. I'm not ready for weights. I need to get a bench so that I can like do some leg lifts and you do body weight exercises, because that's kind of where I think I'm going to be able to get the best out of what I've got going on right now. Then I still want to have this like long-term goal of being able to go to a gym properly and like move a little bit more weight than I'm used to, and trying to push myself a little bit to see like what can I actually do. Like what are I'm not trying to break my bones or anything, but like what can I do sufficiently, that kind of stuff. I think that's part of like being in America, actually. It's like part of the culture.
Yeah, it is.
I think that, and this goes back to I think like after World War II, I think that's when there's like this concentrated effort to include physical fitness in scholastic curricula. I think that's like I don't know what it's like anymore because I don't have kids, so I don't know what their gym is like. But I remember gym class being this like, it was activities. It was always full activity the whole time.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And I hope that still exists. And not in some like, once a week bowling and twice a year going and climbing on a 12-foot rock climbing wall in a gymnasium down the street. Although that would be cool if they did it like frequently.
Our school had a rock climbing wall.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. If you have one,
like
that's even better.
I think it was 20 foot.
Oh, that's so sweet. I always wanted to have a rock climbing wall.
It had to be about 20 foot.
Nowadays, you can get structures that are basically like 3D printed sections of rock, like big faces of rock to bolt onto things and create like boulder face surfaces. That's just crazy.
Yeah, you can 3D print a lot of shit now. I mean, pretty much anything.
Yeah. Fucking robots printing spaceships.
Yeah.
Speaking of outer space, you read about the primordial black hole that is the candidate for Planet 9, right? So, it occurred to me, like, what if it's not, like, orbiting the sun? What if everything's orbiting it? And it's like the binary counterpart to our star. Because I was reading about
very possible.
how
depending on the mass,
how single star solar systems are actually kind of uncommon.
Yeah.
They're almost all binary systems. Some have 3 stars, but it's a really
they're very uncommon.
Yeah, especially like with as many planets as it has, because typically the biggest planet will have swept in and taken everything out in the inner solar system. But if we're just swinging around the rim of a black hole, that could explain our perception of the expansion of the universe, right?
I mean, potentially, but the universe is definitely expanding too, because there's so many things that are being traced to show that, which is how they can trace the speed, because it's like calculating the movement of stars in different directions, and the rate of expansion of the universe can be calculated because of multiple points of triangulation. But this is where obviously we've only been recording these movements for so long, so the bigger orbits are going to be harder to detect until we've gone through at least a portion of it. So now, these orbits with the black holes, who knows, they may be 100,000 fucking million year long orbits.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they may not be perceptible at all until our algorithms are able to calculate better trajectories and estimate. So that's kind of where, I think it's just a matter of not knowing. Yeah, because if we're talking about these super massive things, then the orbits are probably going to be super long too, just proportionally. So that's kind of where, again,
if it's like a million-year orbit,
it could be something like that.
Then
if
it would
it's
be
between the orbit.
We wouldn't be able to calculate that, because by the time that we had traveled far enough to have a meaningful calculation, everything else will have moved.
Yep, and our civilization probably would have gone through some major event one way or another.
Well, if our solar system is circling a black hole and we just can't detect it,
that's a strong possibility.
Then and the universe isn't expanding, and interstellar travel is really easy because we're just on a imprisoned planet because humans are too damn violent. Then it serves us right that we're I think.
Well, because I think what ends up happening is the longer the orbit becomes, the less perceptible the orbit's movement is, and such that it's less likely that we're going to see it. So that's ultimately what it just comes down to, is like those super long orbits are going to be less perceptible. Okay. 2 hours ish.